Meet Venkateswaran Doraisamy, who's from Erode, Tamil Nadu and belongs to a family of generational entrepreneurs.
Grandfather was an entrepreneur on his own, man. During his days, father also took up to entrepreneurship. So he started it independently.
Right.
Took up a loan from my grandfather and started on his business.
Right.
So while I also was, dreaming of, doing things independently.
But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Venkateswaran's father suddenly passed away and he was thrust into the family business.
So I had to join the family business, and because I was the eldest son in the family, so I had to partly participated with my uncle.
He toiled alongside his uncle, scaling the textile business his enterprising grandfather had built in Erode. But soon, challenges emerged. A key issue? The sheer number of family members on the payroll and a noticeable disparity in their effort.
We could sense the displeasure. There was a cold war or a cold understanding. So we did attempt at staying together.
Right.
But there again, lack of formal...
Correct. It caused trouble.
A little semi-formal.
Right.
But it was too early and we really didn't have the grip of how to control this or all those things.
So the family business split then?
Yes, ma'am.
It was the absence of a formal succession plan that caused the rupture in Venkateswaran's family business. Today, the 63-year-old Venkateswaran and his brother, Shanmuga Sundaram, are at the helm of a separate company, CD Technotex, which specializes in woven packaging. And here, they're implementing crucial lessons from their past. They've drafted a family constitution which outlines the family's core values, principles, vision, and objectives, both in relation to their personal lives and any family businesses.
Every individual who's going to come into the family or as a family member and participating in the family business also should consider themselves not as a part owner of the facility or the business, but as a custodian of the family estate. So there again, we would like to professionalize the business as part of it so that the individual, depending on the capacity, capabilities and the qualifications, they may also occupy anywhere in the middle management or in the top management or even head the organization also. So our mindset as well as the next generation mindset also has been prepared that we'll have these three Venn diagram circles where one will be family and the other one will be management and the third one will be investors.
Venkateswaran's story is part of a larger trend of small, tightly held family-run businesses across the country drawing up corporate family trees. This is a trend that highlights how formalizing succession, carving out businesses, and setting up family constitutions is no longer just for the likes of the Godrej, Apollo Hospitals, Murugappa, or TVS groups. For generations, businesses like Venkateswaran's have been built on trust, tradition, and often unwritten rules. But times are changing. The unexpected can strike, and growth brings with it its own complexities. And that's where our story begins today. It's Friday, June 6th. I'm your host, Dia Rekhi, and you are listening to The Morning Brief from The Economic Times. Whether it's a pump maker in Coimbatore or a spice exporter in Virudunagar, small businesses are waking up to the need for formal succession planning. They've realized that the traditional structures like Hindu undivided families or HUFs often led to confusion and disputes. The shift is also driven by investor expectations. Whether it's raising venture capital, private equity, or going public, clarity on leadership and governance is now essential. Falguni Shah, partner at PwC, explains.
So, various factors there, but maybe to begin with, we must also note that how businesses have changed. Over the last decade or so, most businesses are trying to become globally competitive. The scale has become very large. So most businesses now have private equity coming in and, raising stakes. People are going for listing. So this changing environment has led to a situation where before the investors really come in, they want to understand what is the succession plan in this business. People are realizing that lack of clearly laid down succession plan can really impact the business continuity, and therefore it can impact the investors value. The second
Right.
thing is the fact that most kids are now studying abroad. When they come back and they join family business, they want to know what is in it for them. Gone are the days when kids will join the family business, work there for 10 years, and they want to know what are they going to get out of it at the end of the decade. So people want clarity before they really enter the business. Thirdly, because the businesses have become more complex, you need more and more professionals coming in and handling some or all the functions of the business. And owners are taking strategic role. In that situation, it is very important that there is a clarity on roles, responsibility, because otherwise you are not giving a level playing field to professionals. And in that sense, the succession plan therefore becomes a necessity. And people are realizing that gone are the days when whatever the patriarch will say will be taken as, the rule of the game. People want to ensure that there are no internal conflicts in future. There is clearly laid down roles, responsibility, control roles, decision making process. So need for that clarity and to ensure that family conflicts are kept to the bare minimum is possibly the next reason why people are looking at the formal succession plan.
Right. And those are a lot of really interesting points, and we'll make sure to break them down in a lot more detail later on. But let's start with private equity. How much of a factor is that when it comes to succession planning?
I mean, yes, it has become necessity. When you're inviting private equity, it usually means that you're going and bringing investors or stakeholders who are much more than family. The private equity have their own set of governance rule, they have their own commitments to the investors, they have their reporting mechanisms. And when they really come in and put money into the business, they are looking at continuity, they are looking at sustainability, they want to create value out of it, and they want to maybe in most cases take the businesses public. In those situations, if there is no clarity at the level of family to in terms of who's going to take over the reins of the business, who's going to call shots, what is the role and responsibility of each individual, are they measured for their KPIs, or are they being treated as the entitled? These are all very important points, and they are very critical part of the governance that needs to be put in place at the stakeholder level. So, in my mind, and as per my views, yeah, this is very critical to ensure that families are managing their affairs in a transparent way and they are following the governance structure that they have laid down.
Absolutely. And Falguni, how does succession planning help with
Yes.
corporate governance?
So, not just succession planning there, but let me elaborate this a bit more. See, in a family business, assume that there is no external stakeholder involved. The usual practice is for family to assume that family and business, they are one and the same thing. So, when I'm
Right.
running a business in a company, a tendency usually is that there is no mark to market salaries that the family members are withdrawing. There is no arm's length transaction in terms of, for example, the business is using the office place owned by family. Each of this transaction, which are called related party transaction, needs careful handling. Now, when you are doing it all as a part of only family enterprise umbrella, you're okay. But now if you think about it from the lens of corporate governance, each of this item needs to be justified from the angle of need, from the angle of why are you holding, for example, brands at a family level? Why have you not transferred assets in the main business company, so on and so forth? So, all transactions where the business entity is interacting with family members or other group companies need to be seen from the lens of corporate governance. And that is why the entire governance structure at family level itself becomes very important.
Falguni, I'd love for you to take us through the landscape of family businesses in India, as well as some interesting insights that you found through PwC's 11th India Family Business Survey.
In India, large part of publicly listed companies are family owned and controlled. Because in Indian context, in listed company, promoters can have as much as 75% shares, right? And you can still remain listed. 9 out of 10 publicly listed Indian company is family owned and controlled. Now, the second data point was from the people that we surveyed. We found that from what we surveyed, 63% of the leaders said they had formal governance structure in place. I'm not saying from the total listed company, 63% had formal governance structure. I'm saying 63% of those surveyed. So that governance structure was either in the form of shareholder agreement or a trust document or a formal family constitution. So it was different size and shapes, but they had something in place. Other people had not even thought about having a formal structure in place. So that's the landscape. And in our view, this is quite a demanding situation. People really need to move ahead fast and ensure that they have put in place a formal succession planning for leadership change and ownership change. And they also have put in place a conflict resolution mechanism.
But do you see smaller family owned businesses from tier 2 and tier 3 cities also formalizing succession structures?
In our experience, we're seeing more and more tier 2 and tier 3 families warming up to the need. I'm not sure what makes them more alive to the need than their counterparts in the listed arena. But largely, we are seeing tier 2 and tier 3 businesses, significant businesses with generations of people involved, generally, people who have 2 or 3 siblings and their kids. So there are cousins and there are siblings involved in the business. Those are the kind of businesses who have really become alive to the need to succession planning.
But are there any unique challenges that Indian family businesses face when it comes to succession planning?
I think most family business face one or two of this challenge. But if I was to give it an Indian flavor, what we are seeing is the family dynamics, the interpersonal equations between family members, emotional bonds. Sometimes some of this complicate objective decision making. So that's one challenge that I really see more prevalent. Sometimes the challenge in the Indian context also is legal and tax hurdle. So in a listed context, there may be CBT core code. In unlisted context, there could be tax laws. There is also something called Hindu undivided family, so rules and regulations governing that. So each of this aspect need careful handling, and that may pose challenge in smooth implementation of succession planning. So that's the second point. The third point in smooth implementation of succession planning is the resistance, letting go. So, when you have to hand over the baton to the next generation, you have to help them settle into the role. Sometimes we see the challenge of the founder not able to do it very easily, and therefore resistance to let go faces poses the challenge for effective succession planning. And because in the Indian context, I must say that families are larger, we have different stakeholders at play, and therefore disagreements around valuation, unequal profit sharing may pose challenge in terms of succession in ownership.
My next guest feels that structured succession planning is still at a very nascent stage across most Indian family enterprises, irrespective of size and the scale of their business, wealth, or intergenerational complexity. Srinath Sridharan is the author of Family and Dhanda, which focuses specifically on succession planning, intergenerational transition, and governance. Listen in.
Succession planning premises the fact that somebody who's the founder or the patriarch or the head of this generation of the business is going to say that whatever I have done for the last 35, 40 years, I'm not going to do anymore. And somebody is going to run this business or lead this business henceforth. And that conversation of when do you start is what I see a huge hesitation across India. Look at 6,800 listed entities in NSE and BSE. How many of them they actually have declared a succession plan? And the book actually came up when I realized during COVID, 64 key management personnel, KMPs of listed entities passed away during COVID. And most of the companies or none of those companies actually had formal succession for any of them.
No, absolutely. But Where do you feel the biggest challenges arise?
So I think a couple of things. One, we are seeing a lot of investments of private capital that's coming into some of these businesses. These businesses have been existing, let's say, 20 to 40 years, and the family has held it together and scaled it. But today they're inviting PEs and VCs to actually come in, which means that the way that they functioned has to change. And whether it is the management style, the leadership style, or their governance style, which means the people on the board, everything has to change. How do you ensure that your business can run even without you? I mean, that's one of the most insecure question to ask anybody there. Most of the Indian promoters actually don't have a hobby at all, which means that all they have thought in the last 40 years and built and given their blood and sweat, so to speak, is their business. So when you suddenly tell them, hey, chill, retire, come in for the board meeting and do something, they don't know how to do. And that stops or stalls the entire ideology of succession planning. You go to a successful promoter and say, you don't have to think about the children being the successor. It can be a professional leaders who are also successors. And most of them really don't know when to step back. And also, I think today it's also becoming very fashionable to say that we have succession planning without actually having succession planning. And I think that's what, when the serious conversations happen on the listed entity boards around succession planning, I think that's when India Inc. will also learn downstream, saying that if I were an SME, I don't have the resources to hire advisors and consultants to do certain things. Who do I talk to? I think that's the next starting point that the families will start searching there.
Srinath, I wanted to ask you, as someone who does advise different families, how difficult is that conversation, to say that I don't necessarily think that your children are the best fit for this business, or it would be better for you to bring in a professional rather than have this internally sorted out in that sense. I am pretty sure it doesn't go down well with most families, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
So I think you're right. It's not just most families. Very few outliers actually take it very well. And it takes time, the time for them to recover that somebody else said it. And for them to actually accept it is the lead time could be very different from probably, let's say, a month to even 2 years. Everybody will say, I want to protect my legacy. And I ask them, what is your legacy? Is the legacy just a name? How do you ensure that when you're not there, 20 years ends, this business still stands? So who's that person who can lead this business into that? So I think very few actually get that. It's a tough conversation. It's a very emotional conversation. Unlike financial planning, where you do very scientifically and data led, succession planning brings a lot of emotions at play. I mean, right from anger to jealousy to greed to tempers running high across the families and all stakeholders involved. If you have three generations of the family involved in this conversation and the set of close friends and leaders within their businesses, it's a very complex conversation because every single emotion has to be addressed before the final solution is met.
This is pretty much, I think, the core of things, right? Addressing the fact that these emotions exist, understanding that every family has these undercurrents somewhere, is the first step towards heading in that direction of succession planning. And possibly the next step would be to draw up a family charter and then get into more detailed succession planning.
So there, I would probably keep the family charter to much later. I use the model A to Z of succession planning, and I'll give you a quick gist of what I call the ABCD formula. The family as a whole might come together and say, as a family, our ambition or our aspiration for the future generation is ABC. But family aspiration does not necessarily coincide with what is D, which is personal desire. Each individual might have a different desire. Somebody might say, hey, I studied in Stanford or came back and I want to do something banking there. And I don't want to come and run this factory, or I don't want to run this small services business. Because in their mind, they're saying that the unit economics of running this and value of their time is far better off if they are staying back in the US. So the A and the D collide. And any succession planning has to give you a better B, right? I mean, which is branding for the family, that the family seems better, is better, and is stronger. The C is where the tough conversations happen about competency, saying that each of the family member or even each of the professional leaders within the family, the non-family leaders, are they competent enough as the company scales and all of that? So I'm just giving you a gist of A, B, C, D, and it's a process that you go down even before you actually bring a family charter. A family charter is possible only when there is a sense of cohesion that all of them agree on. Family charter typically brings in the sense of code of conduct. The family would agree, abide by the do's and don'ts. Simply put, one of the don'ts typically is saying that you will not necessarily do a aggressive M&A bid against your siblings or cousins, or nobody else would buy shares of their cousins or siblings without the family explicit family approval, and so on and so forth. There are lots of it that get covered.
And Srinath, I wanted to understand from you how much of a difference you're seeing with the entire gender aspect. Are we seeing more women from family businesses being involved in making those decisions or being active participants in the family business?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I wish at least the last 30 years that I spent in corporate India, I wish I could say that we have evolved far better than what we were in the 90s. But unfortunately, no. There is still a lot of these conversations which are biased because of the surname, because of the caste, community. There is still bias towards women. The businessman
Right.
who just wanted to probably buy social identity for his spouse, and he bought a business and he said, okay, let her spend. And I've heard conversations which actually are more demeaning, saying, how much will she lose? A crore of rupee, 2 crores a year? That's fine, but it allows me space. How many of the family boards actually have 50% women or one third women? You'll be surprised at the numbers. Far, far lower. How many of the listed entity boards, nifty 1,000 boards, actually have more than 3 women on their boards? Far lesser. So I think there is a larger social awareness that we need to build. And why is it that we have built a male only? I mean, if we can say China plus one as a strategy, it looks like male plus one strategy of bringing women on mainstream.
Definitely. Srinath, I feel it's important for our listeners to get a sense of, who you think has done it right completely or at least more or less have gotten it on point.
So I think without names, yeah, I'm going to give some templates of what people do proactively. And these are very successful families who have crossed 3 to 10 generations of business. They've survived. And the idea is very simple. They're very clear about who will do what, and they're also very clear about who will not do what. And it is very hard to codify this in a wealthy family. Imagine this in a wealthy family where the family is codified saying that you cannot go out and buy a fancy car, but you will buy only a car which the family council decides. And that too, every 3 years you can change your car. And you can travel on work, but the eligibility of travel, whether you travel business class or air or first class in train, depends on your actual role in the company or the factory. So whatever that grade is entitled to is what you're also authorized to travel. So some of these lived examples in code of conduct, it is very difficult to enshrine. And the families who actually get some of these values right from, I think, childhood, I think I've seen phenomenal success in intergenerational communication. Two, I think some of these conversations, what learnings from these successful families who have done succession planning well, is their frequency of meeting, the rigor and depth of conversation of updating all the family members on what's happening in different parts of the business is very, very deep. So, how do you build character in the entire successor fleet that you have in the family? And what do they see right from childhood as that you cannot escape or give up? This is the discipline, this is the code of conduct. And to drive that, I always say you need an extremely humble, empathetic, and sharp matriarch and then a patriarch. So the matriarchs in a lot of communities in India, literally, while they may not be the formal owners and heads of businesses, they actually build a lot of this soft side of what is important for character and values. And I think more we speak about them, I think we'll be doing justice to succession planning in the coming future years.
Family dynamics are complex as they are. Add to that ambition, money, cultural taboos, and you have a business that is so intricately tied with your day to day family life that the lines blur between what is personal and what is professional. As more of the next gen enter the family business, there is likely to be a difference in opinion. The generation gap, as we've called it all along. But what is going to be different this time is that the current generation may not be as afraid to voice their opinion and demand their pound of flesh. Family businesses, which constitute a large portion of India's business landscape, must be well prepared to navigate the future, and that can be done effectively through the emotionally taxing but professionally rewarding pursuit of succession planning. Will they do it though? We'll make sure to let you know. That's it for today. Thank you Venkateswaran, Falguni and Srinath. This episode was produced by Anirban Chaudhary, Rajas Nayak and Vinay Joshi. Sound design by Amrit Reggie. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host Dia Rekhi and you were listening to The Morning Brief from The Economic Times. Have a great weekend.